All right, hello Facebook. Once again, Anthony Frisina here from Above and Beyond, bridging the gap to accessibility and inclusion, and Director of Media Relations for the Ontario Disability Coalition. Joined by Maddy Dever. Maddy, how are you?
I am great. Enjoying the technical challenges that we face each day, but we power through it.
We have powered through it, and now we are back. Maddy, why don't you give the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Maddy Dever. I'm an autistic adult and parent of 5 kids, of which 4 are also autistic. I am. I was in a wheelchair. I was in a car accident 2 years ago and suffered a spinal cord injury. So I'm also a wheelchair user, and I spend a majority of my time these days advocating for autistics and people with disabilities to have a seat at the table where decisions are made, and to have our voices heard when the policy issues affecting us are actually influenced by us. And I am on the board of directors of the Autism Alliance Canada, which is formerly known as CASDA, the Canadian Spectrum Disorder Alliance, and ConnectWell Community Health, the community health centers in rural Eastern Ontario.
Excellent, excellent. And it's National Accessibility Week, and we are in day 4, talking about different areas that affect people with disabilities, not only here in Ontario and in Canada, but worldwide. So, and it is also Red Shirt Day. Maddy and I are both sporting our red shirts for Red Shirt Day. And our conversation, Maddy, today is on economic inclusion. And that is something where do we start?
Well, I think we could start off with where we are at, which is where we don't have economic inclusion, and hopefully, after we've unraveled what's wrong with the way things are, we can start to look at how it should be. So right now, I mean, we'll use Ontario as it's where we both live. In Ontario, there are 2.6 million people with disabilities that are living in Ontario. Of that, there are 400,000, just around 400,000, give or take a 1,000 here or 1,000 there, people living on Ontario Disability Support Program, which is our disability program for people who do not have income. That's what we live on, and we are stuck. The poverty line across Canada. What's considered the line of the poverty line is $2,200 a month. A single person with disabilities in Ontario gets $1,169. So it's almost, we're on. It's to get there. We would need to almost double ODSP just to get to the poverty line. We've been living with a program that has not kept up with inflation. That every month that goes by, we lose $7 of purchasing power because inflation is so high. When inflation is 6.7% monthly, that means $7. And over a year, it's $63. That's just one aspect of where we're at right now, right? We have Because we don't have a stable income. There's a huge domino of all of the things that affect our lives. You know, when you don't have a stable income, you don't have stable housing. 1169. Can we find, no matter where you are in Canada, it'd be very difficult to find an apartment for under $1,169 a month. All right. So when you don't have stable housing, it's really difficult to have stable employment. If you can work, if you want to work, there's notwithstanding the many difficulties that we have in doing that, which we'll talk about in a little bit. You know, um, to get employment, you need to have a place to live. You need to have the funds to get to work. And when you don't have stable income, you don't have access to proper nutrition. When you don't have proper nutrition, your health, your health is at risk. And all of these together, struggling under poverty seriously affects your mental health. That's where we're at today.
Well, yeah, Maddy, and you spoke to the numbers. About 400,000 of the 2.6 million are on ODSP. What about those who are trying to get on ODSP, and what about that process just to get on ODSP? Wait
Yeah,
lists, the paperwork, the struggle, just to get on ODSP, so that you can
yeah.
have some semblance of, let's call it what it is,
Yeah.
survival.
Yeah. So one of the first barrier that many of us face when we become disabled and can't work, and we're realizing that, well, we need to apply for ODSP, which I think the first barrier is the stigma, the internal ableism that we feel. Once we get past that because of survival, the next barrier is, what if you don't have a family doctor? You need there's a very complex application process that requires doctors to fill out forms and provide some medical records. That not having there's a majority of us in Ontario that don't have a primary care practitioner, whether it's a physician, whether it's a nurse practitioner. So getting that, just in order to be able to apply for a DSP, you need somebody to speak to your disability and help describe how disabled you are. So that's a barrier. All right. Once you get that, or if you already have that, it's a large application, and it can take doctors some time, to find the time to do paperwork. Even though they get paid for it, they don't get it paid enough for it compared to other things that they need to do. So, and if you can imagine it in practices, many people are having the doctors do the same thing, some form here or there. All right, that's the doctor part of things. The hardest thing for me when I applied for ODSP twice. The second time I got it, the first time I was probably at my not quite my worst physically, but it was a low place in my life, and I didn't have a clue what to do or how to do it, and I lost my doctor in the middle of it, so I had nobody to sort of help with that. The second time, I was able to access an organization that provided a nurse practitioner that could go over my medical records and do that part for me. But the hardest part for me, the thing that I think kept me from took me a longer period of time to actually do the application, was the self report, where you have to talk about yourself at your worst, the worst day, the worst experiences, how disabled you can be. And I'm a person that talks about strength, even in its challenges, and that's a really, really hard thing to do. I've just had to, the other aspect of ODSP, which you know is every 7 years you need to sort of reapply, or at least update things to prove that you're still disabled. And I was reading, I got that package, and I was reading my self report, and it just utterly did me in, because I know I'm worse physically, and I have more problems than I had then. But just reading what I had to write about myself was just so hard. And that really makes it difficult for some people who may have all the medical stuff. They don't know how to write about themselves. And they certainly don't know how to write about themselves at their worst.
Yeah, Maddie, you're right. Like, it is demoralizing to really have to talk about yourself and dictate your worst credentials in terms of needs and assessments and feelings, and kind of proving disability, essentially
Hmm.
proving the need for this financial support so you can have some semblance of survival. Okay, so now you get on ODSP, and for a single person, it's 1169 a month. You talked about uh, we can talk about how that money breaks down in a little bit, but 497 of that is allocated to shelter. Yeah, in quotations. Um, 497 of that is allocated to shelter. I'm not even going to call it housing, because
Hmm.
there's no housing available for 497. You talked about inflation. You talked
Hmm.
about the cost of living going up. And ODSP has remained stagnant since 2018, when we were promised a 3% increase for the next 3 years, only to get a 1.5% increase in 2018.
Hmm.
Where does that leave the disability community? Where does that leave many of the 400,000 clients
Yeah.
scratching and clawing? It's on a monthly basis. The decisions are food, shelter,
Hmm. Yeah.
clothing, and
So.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, so there are so many tiers of um, in housing, right? You've got your top, your top. So you got people who buy houses and live in them. You have people who buy houses and rent them out. The landlords. You've got people who rent, and you got people who room, and then you got people who are homeless. And the lower you are in the totem pole, the less rights you have. you know Obviously, if you're homeless, you've got nothing, right? If you're renting a room, you have no rights. There's nothing protecting you. There's no statute protecting you to be able to know that the next month or even the next day that you can stay where you are. You have to take, when you're on ODSP, you have to take whatever you can find because you need to survive. ODSP is we should actually, you know what? Here's what we're going to do now. It's the Ontario Disability Survival Program. It's not the support program, right? Every day I come up with one of these things, but it's no longer, there's no support in ODSP, so it's the survival program, all right? So you're taking these rooms because you're surviving. You're finding a place to have your roof over your head, so a place where you could hopefully eat some food and live to the next day. Then you have renting, and you're mostly protected, to a large degree as tenant. You have rights, right? When you when you own your own house, you have way more rights, way more opportunities, and you are protected. Now, it can be difficult to buy the next big house, right? But you own a house, you've got it. And then you've got the landlords who have the luxury of the value of a property. They're getting the income of rent, and they're generally well protected in the the landlord tenant board rules. We need people with disability. We're stuck in the bottom two. We need to get in the middle. We need to be able to rent and have our own place that is protected, or we need rules. We need the renting rooms to have the same rules as renting apartments and renting other houses. One of the two has to happen, but we have no rights. Those of us who can't afford our own place have no rights right now. None. Zero, zilch. And
Yeah,
every month we have less money
and
to spend on that.
yeah, especially as cost of living goes up and price gouging, and
Mhm.
not to mention even buying power on the internet. The price of buying something on the internet is more than the price of actually buying it in store.
Yeah.
If you think about it, it's the ease of receiving it, the lack of not needing to go out to go get it. But in essence, you compromise a higher price to purchase what you need to purchase. When you
Yeah.
factor in shipping, when you factor in all the different types of added costs to buying something online.
Yeah.
What, Maddie? Going back to ODSP,
Mhm.
talking about the gaps to it
Mhm.
for different types of living situations. We talked about a single person.
Mhm.
What if you want to have a relationship? Like what happens to ODSP?
What? Oh, wow. Well,
Oh,
that's you've just hit the gravy train, right? No, it's the opposite. It is significantly challenging to have a relationship where you're living with a partner on ODSP because they do not look at you individually anymore. They look at you as a couple. So you get a higher ODSP rate than the single one. Not a lot, but there is a bit of a jump. However, you are tied to whatever income that your partner makes. So if your partner works, their income gets deducted. There's clawbacks against their income to your ODSP, right? You have to remember the disabled person. It's your ODSP. It's not your partner's ODSP. It's your ODSP. But they look at your partner as part of the family, the family income. So every dollar, after the first $200, which we get to keep, oh thank you, after the first $200, every for every dollar after that, doesn't matter who's making it, right? It doesn't matter which one of you is making it. 50 cent of that is going to get clawed back. So if they have a good job but you're disabled, the ODSP looks at, well, they are going to look after you, and you become incredibly dependent upon that partner. And we generally have there's a much higher rate of partner violence, domestic violence for people with disabilities than the broader population, which sucks as it is, right? So we're more likely to be abused physically, emotionally, financially. If your partner has the purse strings, you know, you're tied to that, and it's really, really. I've talked to a lot of women who have, especially who have experienced this, and they don't know. Like it scares them to get off of it, and they don't. We lose our agency. So in many cases, like it's a penalty to be involved with somebody. You end up, your situation can be worse, and you have, whatever agency that you may have had being independent and single, it gets stripped away. Where partnerships are supposed to be a cohesive partnership, but it ends up being unequally balanced, and there's such a larger danger, because especially if your partner earns so much that you don't qualify for ODSP anymore, and the partnership dissolves. That sounds like a business. Your relationship ends. I sometimes I listen, like it's clinically correct what I'm saying, but it just sounds so wrong. So we're going to change it. So when your relationship ends, you have to start over with the ODSP again. It depends on how long it's been. You might have to start from scratch and go through that whole onerous process again. And I'm, the reality is we don't want relationships to end. We have, we're full of hope and rainbows and unicorns and all that stuff, but they don't always work out. And it's the way we have things right now. It really puts an unequal balance in the relationship between the disabled person and the abled person. Now, if you're both are on ODSP, there's a double ODSP. It's a little bit more, still below the poverty line, but it's a little bit higher. I mean, there's no, unless you have no, actually, there is no part of ODSP that you are ever out of the poverty line. If you are on one ODSP with making 1169 and you work full time on a minimum wage job for 40 hours, 37.5 hours a week, only at that point, after a clawbacks, do you get above the poverty line. Just let that sink in.
Okay.
Sorry,
I appreciate.
I can rant on this for hours.
We've got time. We're about 18 minutes in. I want to give a shout out to Ryan and Sherry for their comments. If you're joining us, give us some comments so we can shout you out as we go along. The system is broken. Now, while you were talking there, Maddy, I wanted to just bring something up that maybe you can shed some more light on too. So you transition in from being a single person on ODSP to a relationship in which ODSP fluctuates in different ways, one way or the other. And then you go back and the relationship doesn't work out and you're back to being single. What is that like for that process to go from on ODSP from transition to a relationship back to no longer having a relationship?
Well, because of ODSP being um, the system that it is, it starts off with a demeaning system under poverty. We have a relationship which, oh wow, there's somebody to share that with, and hey, there's a little bit more money because there's two people now doing things, and then you're thrown back again into the demeaning world of ODSP. So your mental health is going to go from, you know, bad to good to bad to worse. You know, it's that whole process. There's nothing in that process that's um, going to feel positive. There's no. I'm a firm believer and at looking at disability and autism and everything with a strength based lens. Like everything I do in my life, when I look at my own self, I focus on like the strengths, the things that are going well, the things that I can control, the things that I can do, and I acknowledge the challenges that I have, and I try to find the support that I have. And 9 out of 10 days, I can live that way. However, that one day tends to be the days that I'm dealing with something with ODSP or something like that, where the system is just so freaking flawed, that it just depresses you. So if you've been in a relationship and that relationship ends and you're back, and especially if you have to start from scratch and with the application, and like you're desperate, like you need to survive, but this process does not make it easy, and it does not sustain us, but it's better than nothing, right? Nothing is what you have without that. So just to let people know that may not be aware of this, but in Ontario, the steps you go through to get onto ODSP is, at first you go on to Ontario Works, which is the social assistance program, and you have to prove that your financial situation, and you start with that, and then once you're registered in the Ontario Works, then you can get the application package to get to apply for the Ontario Disability um, you know asterisk program. Um, and so that there's like there's a step, then a step. Ontario Works is significantly worse than ODSP. Being on Ontario Works, which is meant to be a temporary thing to sort of get you through that, is even more below poverty. And the reality is, and I hope we can talk the last 20 or so minutes about where should we go, but we need social supporting people needs to be at the poverty level. Supporting people with disabilities needs to be above that because our costs are higher. The very fact that we know there's a difference between Ontario Works and ODSP means that both should be at or above poverty. And people with disabilities, we have more needs. Our needs are higher. We need to be able to support that. And yeah, so the whole system of jumping into OW, then like having to survive on that, which is better than nothing, and then graciously be accepted into the ODSP program, and then we have a lifetime of rules, a lifetime of clawbacks, a lifetime of gaps, a lifetime of things that we can't do to improve ourselves, a lifetime of poverty.
Yeah, and I was just about to get into that, Maddie, with you. Like our autonomy, our agency, our ability to self-govern is non-existent.
Yeah.
We're stretched to the limit in terms of what our abilities are, and we're forced to adhere to a framework that doesn't necessarily work for people with disabilities. As you said, our costs are higher. Medication, support, different assistive devices, the whole gamut really speaks to the disability community and having our needs kind of met with dignity, met with
Hmm.
respect. And
Yeah.
that's just for anybody. The ability to be treated with respect and dignity comes with the the proper need and support of ODSP. Like
Yeah.
you touched on it earlier, Maddie, about nutrition,
Hmm.
quality of life,
Yeah.
uh, being able to eat healthier rather than eating something small and quick because it costs cheaper. The
Hmm.
cost is cheaper. There's that factor. There's factors of uh, your housing, your stability,
Mhm.
and disability. For those watching, also and hearing us, looks different for everybody on a day-to-day basis. Just
Mhm.
because you see somebody with a disability one day doesn't mean you're going to see that same person the next. I think it's important that we mention that too, Maddie.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's important that we understand that quality of life should not be dictated by the non-disabled community, and really that's what it is. It's an superiority slash inferiority level
Mhm.
as governing over the disabled community to
Yeah.
be below those who are non-disabled.
Yeah, and you see that, we spent the last 5 weeks now in Ontario really pushing this campaign for hashtag double ODSP now, with trying to, express to every party, you know, the real and raw situation we're in, the crisis that we're in, the fact, that we're in deep legislative poverty, that the government has the power to change this, and we're asking parties one question: will you double ODSP now? Will you bring us from 1169 to 2338, which is just above which at this point now is probably where the poverty line is, because that poverty line 2020, that 2200 that I talk about, that's 2020s, and we know that we've seen 11%, 9.5% inflation rate since 2020. So 20, like, doubling ODSP is at the poverty line now, right? So we've been asking this question, and what we see, we're seeing the different types of attitude that people have towards us, towards people with disability, in terms of how, whether they'll, increase ODSP at all, how soon they'll increase it, by how much they'll increase, and how they think that what they're doing is a good job. And I'm not going to get into this, like, talking about which parties. You can go to the just look up the hashtag double ODSP now, and you'll see lots of posts about that. But there's parties who think that 5% is great when inflation's at 6.7%. There's parties that think that 10% now, 10% next year, and then uh, fixing it to inflation is a great thing. It's somehow like a total of 20% over 2 years is going to really get us out of poverty. Um, and then there's the parties who say, yes, all right, we're this is a priority. We hear you. We apologize that we may not have heard you, but we're going to do it. And so those parties are listening. So there's different attitudes across the population, about how important our needs are, and it's frustrating. Like, it's really great to see that, especially, we've been able to keep disability rights and poverty on the ballot. This has been an issue that's talked about it by politicians, it's being talked about by media, and it's being talked about, by people who are, suddenly becoming allies, because they're realizing how poorly, we've been treated. So I forget the question you asked me, but I'm I'm seeing, like, we have to push against this attitude. It's like, well, how are we going to find the money to do this? Like, or why should we do this? Like, get a job. Like, the thing that I get so angry is when I hear certain people say the best social assistance is a job, and that's not the case for people with disabilities. And ODSP should not be considered a social assistance. It should be a benefit to help to support those with disabilities. It's not the same as Ontario Works. It's not the same thing at all, right? And when we think about it in the same way, then the stigma stays with us. We need to change the program to make it something that actually supports us, something that actually builds us up, something that actually helps us to improve our quality of life, helps us to improve our medical health, something that, but it all starts with us being able to have financial security. Without an income that's secure, without enough to pay for stable housing, without enough to pay for food, you know everything else, falls down like a domino. But let's build the domino up properly. Let's properly fund this. If we are able to afford housing, stable housing, and we can afford stable food, and we can eat the right food. Our nutrition is better, and our medical health is better, and we have access to better quality of life because we can go out and do things. Everybody gains. We are our
Yeah.
contribution to society instead of being a burden, which is what we are. And I hate the fact, we're not our value is inherent because we exist. But our
Mhm.
society has made us a burden, and we feel that. It shouldn't be the way. We should not be burdens. And some of us feel too burdened to survive or live in this planet. And that is like we are a Western society, supposedly. We are a first world country, supposedly. It's 2022. Yet we're still treating people with disabilities as a burden, and it's not right.
Yeah,
There's a
and
better way.
there is, Maddie. Thank you. National Accessibility Week this year is hashtag inclusive from the start. Um, as it relates to ODSP, Maddie, as we navigate through the pandemic, not sure what wave we're in now. We've gone up and down, so to speak. Now, the federal government stated that the cost of living was $2,000 for those who couldn't work because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Why isn't ODSP at that level at the minimum? Okay.
Yeah. So we had federally, we had a minority government situation with a liberal government with NDP support pushing CERB. Originally the liberals, like, I'm kudos to the liberals for coming up with a system to support people in the midst of the biggest crisis we've had in our generation. Originally, they were offering 1,600 a month, and the NDP pushed them to have it. The NDP and the Green Party pushed them up to get to 2,000, which is where it stayed. All right, there was a lot of pushback by more conservative people that was too high, that was too much, and there should be way more rules put upon it. You know, provincially, we're seeing the same thing. There's supporting the there are a lot of economists that think a basic income is a good thing, right? There's a lot of economists who you think would generally be more right wing, more conservative, that also think that a basic income is can be a good thing, right? We spend a lot of money on all kinds of programs where we're funding people in different ways, whether it's tax credits, whether it's direct income things, whether it's downloaded things to provinces or municipalities. If you put all that money together, but it actually give it out to people, the economy would be better. And it worked. Having people having CERB, when they wouldn't have had money otherwise, it kept the economy going and it kept people going. So there's a lot of people that think it works. However, there is a real we I think we really saw the gaps. You know, people with disability not being able to get this 2,000, and us living $1,000 beneath that floor. Right, $2,000 isn't the ceiling; it's the floor. Right, and it seems like a ceiling to us because we're underneath it, but we're actually in the basement. Is what we're in. We're in the cellar. Oh my God, yes, we're the people that are living in a cellar. We're not good enough to be up with the people who have their noses up high. No, we're 2,000 became the new floor of what is the minimum needed to survive in Canada. 1169. We're in the dirt cellar. People on Ontario Works are even more so. Like it has definitely changed a lot of people's mindsets about they're seeing the discrepancy. And I think that's also why, like, the federal government has been looking at all this and seeing how the provinces most provinces are treating people with disability very poorly. They're not funding us properly, and I think it's one of the reasons why they came up with this idea of a Canada disability benefit, um, which their thinking is intended to be on top of whatever we get from the provinces, right? It's trying to find a financial benefit that will enable us to thrive. That's the idea of it. You take what you're getting from the provinces to survive, and you get from the federal government something to thrive. And I mean, it's completely murky in terms of what it's actually going to be. And it's been good for two reasons. One, it's given us hope with inside of provinces that we just don't see anything moving. But the flip side is now some provinces are saying, well, we don't have to do anything more because the feds are going to throw some money in. The problem is that's not like every province, every provincial, every premier is responsible to ensure that none of their citizens live below poverty, especially those that are disadvantaged. And we need to push provinces. We need to push whoever's going to end up being premier, at the end of the night tomorrow, or first thing Friday morning, depending how long it takes. Um, you know, we can't leave them off the hook because first of all, we have no idea what this benefit is going to actually be, and two, we can't wait. We need help now. There's a moral responsibility for government and for the politicians that are in it to support the people that cannot support themselves. And if you help us get, if we're given the funds to live, the funds to house ourselves properly, the funds to feed ourselves properly, the funds to be able to get to employment if we're able to, if and we're building a better world, and everyone benefits. The costs to healthcare, the costs to poverty, the cost to food banks, the cost to everything increases the longer we stay down in the cellar.
Yeah, Maddie, and I say this with respect. We need to eliminate food banks to allow people to shop more for nutritious foods at
Yeah.
grocery stores. We've got a comment from Lucy Drummond in the chat. How do we make better policies? Like,
Include people with disabilities at the table.
yeah,
Have an advisory. Have
plain
an
and
advisory.
simple.
Yeah, have an advisory panel that the minister brings things to and hears concerns from people. Have people with disabilities on it. Bring us to the table. Listen to us.
I I have a little bit of an issue with that word advisory.
Yeah.
I it, as an
Expert panel.
advisement.
Expert panel.
Exactly, expert panel. Advisory really means, yeah, we'll hear,
Yeah.
we'll listen to you, but will you hear us?
I
Will
agree.
what we actually say have any teeth to it? Speaking to ODSP, there's no teeth behind it. There's no
No.
accountability behind it. There's no, and the response to get answers to the
Mm-hmm.
different types of, and I'm using air quotes here, assets of different types of ODSP benefits
Mm-hmm.
is crazy to go through, because
Yeah.
we're always having to be our own self advocate, and if you don't know the system,
Mm-hmm.
then the challenge for you is even more greater. What are some of the navigational problems of ODSP and OW, and to the economy side of things? If
Yeah.
ODSP is increased to double ODSP, that money is essentially going back into the economy,
Yep.
which is help. It's a full circle. It's a recycled
Yep.
full circle of helping making the economy better.
Yeah.
What are some of the gaps that are missing, Maddie, that ODSP can help simplify short term, medium range
Sure.
term, and long term?
So Um, we need to expand the role of the ODSP worker to be able to be somebody who can connect you, basically be somewhat of a system navigator to help you, find housing, find point you to employment supports, point you to life supports, um, um, and not just be somebody who, you know tells you that you're not qualified for this benefit, not this benefit. Like, there's I've had some really great workers, right? And the workers that have done this kind of role for me are an exception, and they need to be the rule. Um, the being able to have access, if ODSP uh, covered some of the therapeutic supports that could improve our life or improve our quality of life, like physiotherapy, you know, um, just other things along that vein, that can give us an opportunity to be better. Access to financial coaching to help us, budget better. But yeah, when if ODSP doubled, right, all of that money is going into, it's going right back into the community. It's going to go back into us being able to get better housing, and that money for the housing is going to go to landlords who will also then, invest it into the economy. Like, it's like there's no negatives, because we're, you're changing the trajectory of the vast majority of people with disabilities away from, the downward spiral of poverty to, you know being able to, have a moderate quality of life that will allow us to thrive. ODSP can be, you know a really good life sustaining program, as long as we, the first thing we need to do is pluck it out of the same Ministry of Ontario Works and put it into the Ministry of Accessibility. And, yeah, we need we need somebody focused on it who's got the power of cabinet to see the accessibility and disability, you know going hand in hand, right? An inclusive society, with financial inclusive, funding, is going to be better for everybody. Because you never know, you're one car accident away from a lifetime of disability and a lifetime of needing accessibility.
Yeah, Maddie, you said it. Like, disability is the only demographic that does fluctuate instantaneously. Disability can happen to anyone at any time, and we need to start thinking proactively rather than reactively. We need to put our economy on notice that it'll even help people with disabilities who can work to also work. You
Hmm.
know, which will in turn put more money into the economy. It'll also help uh, amplify quality of life, activities of daily living.
Hmm.
We'll be able to have more autonomy, more agency on the quality of life that we want to live. Those are all factors, Maddie. So where we are right now and where do we go from here are two little stepping stones, so to speak.
Yep.
Um, so where do we go from here?
Sure. Step one: increase ODSP. Step two: stop treating it as social assistance. Step three: you know get rid of the clawbacks and create, caps instead. Step four: add more wraparound supports to the program. Step five: change the focus, and put some intentional focus on the program, uh, in its own ministry. you know each of these steps make the program better and give a pathway to a quality of life. you know Agency, like putting the needs of people with disability first, instead of putting the needs of the program and the ministry first, right? Changing it, if it's inclusive from the start, from this point onwards, you're going to see a better run ministry, and you're going to see more thriving people with disabilities.
Where where do we stand, Maddie? Like in terms of like different people's feelings and emotions and the culture behind disability right now as a part of the economy. Where do we stand in terms of different feelings, different
Sure.
thoughts on the culture of what
Yeah.
the economy looks like for people with disabilities now?
So there was a recent poll done about a month or two ago that amongst many other things, asked people if they supported the idea of the Canada disability benefit, and if they thought it was a priority that should be done, in the next year. And I think 72% were agree or strongly agree with that. So there is a realization, across this country, that there needs to be something significantly more done for people with disabilities. And I think, I would love to see the same kind of polling done in Ontario to get that sense, because I think one of the things that I've realized in my advocacy life, the more actual raw data you have, the easier it is to advocate with government, with ministries, as well as with politicians. I mean, during elections, everything's it's so much about the emotion, so much about the story. That's election talk, right? But the way I find advocacy works is that you need to have data to back this express things that you need to change. And we're seeing that data federally, which is we're holding we've got many people holding the federal government to actually tabling it and actually implementing it in the next year. We need to do the same thing in Ontario, so that regardless of who wins tomorrow, we still need to advocate to make sure this happens. And it's not just increasing ODSP, but reforming it so that it is a support program. So data is where I start with, but because I've seen the data federally. But it's also people some people doing activist stuff with protests and whatnot, and some people going and advocating and meeting with MPPs, meeting with ministry staff, and putting the bug in to change. It takes time, but it can be done.
Well, speaking of tomorrow, Maddie, tomorrow is the election, and can you guess what our talk will be on tomorrow?
I believe we're going to be talking about chocolate and gluten-free butter tarts. Oh, election.
Oh, there we go. And Maddie, you're going to be on the radio tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm being interviewed by CBC, I think Ontario today at noon, and we're going to talk about the challenges people with disabilities have with voting, and some of the things that Elections Ontario has done and should do.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to be part of the solution, tomorrow's your opportunity to go out and vote.
Hmm.
Maddie, this has been fun as always. Thank you again for joining. We'll be back tomorrow. Bye, guys.
All right, bye bye.